In addition to Solomon's fame for wisdom, he is known for being the one who builds the temple. The building of the temple is part of a larger building program. He builds his own palace. He also builds government buildings, a palace for his Egyptian queen, and other cities. The account of the building of the temple begins first with preparations, then the actual building, dedication, and this dedication includes the ritual transfer of the ark to the temple, a prayer of Solomon that includes his promise, the blessing of the temple, and forgiveness, elaborate sacrifices and peace offerings, and a great feast. And it ends with blessing and curses, which follows the Deuteronomic theology that if the people and the king are obedient, then things will go well, and if they do not, things will not go well. So we have here in 1 Kings 8, the priests brought the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord to its place in the inner sanctuary of the house, in the most holy place, underneath the wings of the cherubim. For the cherubim spread out their wings over the place of the ark, so that the cherubim made a covering above the ark and its poles. The poles were so long that the ends of the poles were seen from the holy place in front of the inner sanctuary, but they could not be seen from outside. They are there to this day. There was nothing in the ark except the 2 tablets of stone that Moses had placed there at Horeb, where the Lord made a covenant with the Israelites when they came out of the land of Egypt. And when the priests came out of the holy place, a cloud filled the house of the Lord, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. This latter part is very important because it is also how the book of Exodus ends, with the glory of the Lord filling the tabernacle. And so here the glory of the Lord fills the temple. That word for house also means temple. And yet here is Solomon's prayer. But will God indeed dwell in the earth? Even heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you, much less this house that I have built. Have regard to your servant's prayer and his plea, O Lord my God, heeding the cry and the prayer that your servant prays to you today, that your eyes may be open night and day toward this house, the place of which you said, my name shall be there, that you may heed the prayer that your servant prays towards this place. Hear the plea of your servant, of your people Israel, when they pray toward this place. O hear in heaven your dwelling place, heed and forgive. So at the same time that the glory of the Lord fills the temple, there is an acknowledgement that the temple cannot actually contain God, that God fills even the highest heaven. This mentions also the case of a foreigner coming and praying toward this house. And Solomon asks that God hear the foreigner and do all that the foreigner calls to God, so that all the peoples of the earth may know your name and fear you, as do your people Israel, and so that they may know that your name has been invoked on this house that I have built. This harkens back to the promise made to Abraham that his descendants will be a blessing to the nations. And here, even the Gentiles, those who are not of Israel are to come to the temple and pray to the one God. Solomon goes on, "Blessed be the Lord, who has given rest to his people Israel, according to all that he promised. Not one word has failed of all his good promise, which he spoke through his servant Moses." So again, hearkening back to the Mosaic covenant. "The Lord our God be with us, as he was with our ancestors. May he not leave us or abandon us, but incline our hearts to him, to walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments, his statutes, and his ordinances, which he commanded our ancestors. Let these words of mine, with which I pleaded before the Lord, be near to the Lord our God day and night, and may he maintain the cause of his servant and the cause of his people Israel, so that all the peoples of the earth may know that the Lord is God. There is no other." Solomon is answered by these words from the Lord. The Lord said to him, "I have heard your prayer and your plea, which you made before me. I have consecrated this house that you have built, and put my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will be there for all time. As for you, if you will walk before me and do my statutes, I will establish your royal throne over Israel. However, if they fall away and do not keep the commandments and the statutes, but go and serve other gods and worship them, then God says, I will cut Israel off from the land I have given them." Here are some reconstructions, some drawings that people have made on the basis of the descriptions in the Book of Kings about what perhaps the temple may have looked like. If you Google these, you will see that there is, some degree of variation as to what this may have looked like. One of the notable differences are these 12 bulls, which support the sort of symbolic sea, and also the fact that in the temple, the cherubim are very large and their wings are over the Ark of the Covenant, whereas in the tabernacle, the cherubim are on the kaporet, the cover of the Ark, and quite small. This is a diagram of what the temple would have looked like. There would have been in the most sacred place, the most holy place, a perfect square, and then the holy place outside of it, all of which would be surrounded by storerooms. The altar and the sea of bronze are outside of, of the temple. The temple symbolizes the world that God rules. So the sea of bronze are the waters. The outer room of the temple has pictures of plants and animals and lamps, and it represents the physical world. And the inner room, the most holy place, represents the perfect heavens. All of these worship or cultic activities are designed to show that Jerusalem is the center of worship of Yahweh. About 480 years after Exodus. Also, Solomon is presented as a pious and righteous king. And if he continues so, the people will dwell in peace and safety. It shows that Yahweh has confirmed the dedication of the temple and reconfirmed his commitment to the Davidic dynasty. However, unfaithfulness will result in an end to Jerusalem with the temple. But there is hope if the king repents. We saw in Deuteronomy a very similar pattern. Blessings, potential curses, but the possibility of repentance. A number of commentators describe what they call the Royal Zion theology, as recounted in parts of Samuel, Kings, and in some of the Psalms. And this theology says that Yahweh chose Jerusalem as the place of his special presence and chief city of his people. Yahweh designated David and his descendants to rule from Jerusalem. The Jerusalem temple is to be the center of worship. The Davidic king acts as intermediary, and the continuance of all this is dependent on the people's faithfulness. Within this, Jerusalem is described as a cosmic mountain where Yahweh reigns as king over the created order. For example, in Psalms 46, 48, and 76. There is a special covenant with David, as we've already seen in Samuel and Psalm 89. The king is called a son of God in Samuel and Psalm 2:7. The king is the channel of Yahweh's blessings and the source of life and fertility. We see this in 2 Samuel and also Psalm 72. And this fits in with a view of ancient Near Eastern kingship, that the king is central to worship. Psalm 72 is perhaps the most famous of the psalms having to do with the king. And notice that there is a heavy emphasis on the king doing justice. So, for example, give the king your justice, O God, your righteousness to a king's son. May he judge your people with righteousness and your poor with justice. There is also the idea of prosperity for the people, defending the cause of the poor, giving deliverance to the needy, crushing the oppressor. And in all of this, there is a wish that he endure, that he be like the rain that falls on the mown grass. In other words, life-giving to his people. And his enemies are to bow down to him, and nations give him service, because he delivers the needy when they call, the poor and those who have no helper. He has pity on the weak and the needy and saves the lives of the needy. From oppression and violence, he redeems their life. So this is the basis of the ideal king, the one who is to rule and make things well. Solomon, during his reign, extended Israel beyond the borders of what had been possible with either Saul or David. So if we look at this, at the purple area, that is basically the extent of Saul's kingdom. The sort of greenish area is the territory conquered by David. And then kind of a orangey brown area at the top is where Solomon's area of influence extended beyond what had been that of David. There is still a lot of unconquered territory. We have Phoenicia along the coast and Philistia, and of course the eastern desert and areas above Israel.